What does the metaphor watershed health mean to you?
The watershed health metaphor is a very interesting one to think about. The origin of the notion, as it pertains in this workshop we're having here at the Andrews now, comes from a comment by former Governor of Oregon, John Kitzhaber, that the people of Oregon should rally around the notion of watershed health. Kathy Moore, the co-organizer of this event and director of the Spring Creek Project, asked him, "Governor, what do you mean by watershed health?" Kitzhaber had been an emergency room physician for a dozen years, and he didn't have a very good answer. Hence the work we're trying to do to help him out and help ourselves out. But it's an interesting idea of, if your watershed needs some help, would you want to take it to the emergency room? Would you want to take it to the oncologist? Or should we be thinking more in terms of watershed wellness? Say the ability of the watershed to sort of exercise itself, to have river channel change, to not be constrained by engineering works, for example. So it's quite interesting to think about that notion. We can talk a great deal or even quibble about the definition of the word watershed and what our notion of it is. Is it a stable entity? Is it a dynamic entity? And similarly, on the health side, what is the meaning of health, the absence of illness, or many other candidate definitions? Then we bring those two words together in watershed health, and where does that bring us? I think it does bring us to a point where we have people and the land in which they live, and it's really about the relationship between people and the land, and healthy, sustainable relationships. They'll have to change over time, but it's important that there's a good understanding. I was very moved by the ideas that Robin Kimmerer expressed from the traditions of indigenous people about the gifts and the responsibilities that come with living in the world. And our life's work is to find and exercise our gifts and our responsibilities. And that's a great way to think about living in watersheds.
Mm-hmm. So you've brought quite an eclectic group of people with very disparate views. How has the discussions over the past couple of days helped you to redefine your view of watershed health?
Well, as with previous events through the Spring Creek Project and Long Term Ecological Reflections, where the sciences and the humanities, and in this case on the watershed health theme, people from medical ethics and some other worlds have come together here in the forest. It's been quite exciting, and as I have experienced in some of our other activities where we brought interesting mixes together, exciting new ideas emerge, and an interesting confluence of concept and exploration of language. So it's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So I've gotten the impression from a lot of people that attended that this is really, quite invigorating for them, quite reviving, really may hold them over for a while as they go back to their work, whatever it might be. How do we translate that same feeling to our communities? How do we bring and reinvigorate communities?
I think the translation of the thinking about watershed health to the larger world will occur in many ways, I hope. We have to find ways to reach the grade school kids, because they can help their parents to get the message and to understand the importance of being fully aware of our residents within watersheds and our responsibilities to watersheds and what they give us. So I think the approach will not involve a silver bullet, but a sustained effort operating in many ways. So we're hoping that from this gathering we will have written work from the participants. They will take the impressions that they've gathered in this experience into their own work, into their own hearts and their own work. We will be meeting with people in Corvallis later today, and hopefully those folks will help inform the entire body of the potentials for using notions of watershed health, watershed healing, watershed wealth in a cultural sense. Explore these notions so that we can better carry them out to the full community.
Mm-hmm. And so what is your perspective of these long-term ecological reflection gatherings? How have you seen them evolved, and what do you think the future is?
Our Long-Term Ecological Reflections program is now entering its 5th year, and at the end of the coming week we will have had 9 writers in residence, a week each, and we will have had several special events where up to 20 people, including writers and scientists, often singers, philosophers, have come together to explore an interesting topic like the meaning of watershed health, new metaphors for restoration of forests and watersheds, lessons from cataclysms, destruction and rebirth at Mount St. Helens, and geological, ecological, and human dimensions. These programs have been extremely stimulating. We've gotten a great deal of learning and now a growing body of written work from these efforts, and they far outpaced what I imagined that we might be getting into when we started a little over 4 years ago.
How have they outpaced what your expectations?
Well, we began with a single event, and we didn't have much of a long-range future plan. But we were inspired by that first event on the new metaphors for restoration of forests and watersheds. And the idea of having writers in residence is one that is widespread, although not in the context that we have been exercising it. So we began with the first writer in residence, Robert Michael Pyle. He wrote a very interesting and, from my perspective, seminal essay of only 2 pages called The Long Haul. And he really captured there the importance of taking a long view in our ecological research, but it's also in the culture of inquiry into how ecosystems work and how we should be living within them. So that then reinforced our feelings of the value of this work, non-traditional work, for an experimental forest where we have invested millions of public dollars to study the forest, learn about it using the tools of science. So now we realize that we're long overdue to use the tools of the humanities to work here. So as I've experienced from working here for now about 35 years, one could think you'd get stale and same old, but that's not been the case. It's been very exciting to have new people come in with new tools and new questions and do exciting new work, building on the base of knowledge that's been accumulated by those coming before. And this has proven true with the humanists as well. They've come in, they've observed what's going on in the ecosystem and in the science community, and have had very interesting things to reflect back to us, the longer term residents, but also to reflect about the forest which we work in. So it's been fun for me to learn new things about these very familiar places as I can begin to see them through these new eyes.
Mm-hmm. And are you convinced that their reflections will reach out to the larger society and gradually change the views of society, or the relationships of people to the land?
I think the jury is still out on the wider impact. Certainly the writers have an audience that is different from the scientists. I'm curious at this point, do we just have different niche audiences and we speak with different voices? Or is there the potential to reach much further because of the eloquence that the writers have? I was intrigued and pleasantly surprised when the director of the National Science Foundation quoted from the work of Robert Michael Pyle, our first writer in residence, quoting from his first essay, the first essay to emerge from this effort. The point made by the director of NSF was that just as the long-term log decomposition experiment was conducted with a long-term perspective, as is much of the science here at the Andrews, the National Science Foundation is conducting its multi-billion-dollar-a-year investment in the environmental sciences with the perspective of being into it for the long haul. That
That's
was
very
an
powerful.
affirmation.
Good, good.
One other thing I wanted to comment on is the word watershed is an interesting one. It's rather distinctively American as we use it. As we use it in America, it is the collection of waters within what others might call a catchment or a drainage basin. So synonyms in the global glossary for these features include drainage basin, drainage, simply basin, catchment, and these words all have slightly different spins to them. Basin we can view as simply a vessel. Drainage has the suggestion of flow outward, an evacuation. Catchment is more of a collection sense to it. And it's interesting to think about those notions. Watershed in European context usually refers to what we would call in America drainage divides, the line along which water flows in opposite directions. That too is interesting in terms of ecological reflections, because Robert Michael Pyle, our first writer in residence, is an author of the book Walking the High Ridge, which Walking the High Ridge, Life as Field Trip, which is taken from writings of Vladimir Nabokov, another eminent lepidopterist. And the point is that there must be a high ridge somewhere on which the slope of scientific inquiry gives way to artistic imagination and expression. And there are people like Pyle who can walk that high ridge and have a foot on each side. What we're trying to do with long-term ecological reflections is take a more sort of broader organizational approach to that, where we don't all have the talent to walk that high ridge and have a foot on both sides. But just as we run our science here, where we want people with a great variety of disciplinary perspectives within the sciences to be present, so that we can share across those worldviews. The same too with the humanities and the sciences. If we can bring people from those respective worlds and meet in a forest and beside a stream, we can have conversations that we are very unlikely to have in other places, such as meeting rooms.
Right, absolutely. So what is, if you could project a future for these long-term ecological reflections, or a desire for their continuation, what would it be?
Well, we're here at year 5 in the Long-Term Ecological Reflections program, and I think we've been doing a very good job of accumulating a body of work from the writers in residence and the special events. And we've been posting that on our webpage. And the work is beginning to emerge in print and very nice outlets. What might we see for the next 5 years? I think we'll continue this basic humanities data collection, but I also am wondering how we might engage the scientists to a greater extent, loosen them up, getting them writing more in the first person, and thinking about their feelings about why they are doing the work they are doing, not just the nuts and bolts of the science, and to also bring some of the writers back and have them re-engage in place. And maybe we will do that in groups and share views and work towards perhaps an anthology of writings about individual places and their deeper meanings as viewed from many points of view, and see what we could craft from that. So just as in our science, we're trying to push on to do more synthesis and integration across views, I'm hoping that we can begin to do that in the humanities sciences arena as well.